You wake up, the alarm buzzes, you roll over, glance at your phone, messages, news alerts, half-written to-do lists, another day, another swipe, another scroll. You get out of bed, brush your teeth, drink your coffee, maybe even smile, but underneath it all, something feels off, like a fog behind the eyes, a tightness in the chest, a kind of invisible gravity pressing against your spirit. You can't quite name it. It's not sadness, not in the way we usually define it. It's not anxiety either. It's something heavier, something quieter. You go through your day, work, traffic, small talk, notifications, entertainment, but it's still there, an ache behind your smile, a kind of soul-level exhaustion, as if something inside you is screaming, not in panic, but in fatigue. And here's the strange part. You're not alone. More and more people report feeling the same thing, a kind of psychic weariness, a spiritual heaviness, an aura that feels clouded, as if the atmosphere of life has changed, grown thicker, denser, darker. You try to shake it. Maybe it's burnout. Maybe it's just the news. Maybe you're not sleeping enough. Maybe you need to go outside more. Or maybe, just maybe, something deeper is happening. Because what if this feeling isn't a personal problem? What if it's a symptom? What if the heaviness in your aura is the result of a collective psychic shift? A shift that is invisible, but real. That is silent, but deafening. A psychological tension building beneath society's surface, echoing through dreams, distractions, despair. What if you're not broken? What if you're simply feeling the tremors of a deeper truth? That something inside all of us, something ancient, buried, and long neglected, is starting to wake up, and the ear heaviness you feel is not your enemy. It is your signal. Welcome to the beginning of something we've all been taught to ignore. The weight you feel is not yours alone. It belongs to a world that has forgotten how to listen to the soul. And Carl Jung may have already seen this coming. There was a time, not long ago, in the grand story of civilization, when the soul wasn't a metaphor. It was a reality, a central presence. Every decision, every ritual, every structure of society revolved around one purpose: to nourish it, to understand it, and to protect it from disintegration. People told stories, not just for entertainment, but because they knew that myths were maps, symbols were compasses, archetypes weren't fiction. They were reflections of something real inside each of us. But then, something changed. We entered what Carl Jung would later call the age of disenchantment, a world where the soul was no longer a living entity, but a word we said only in poetry or religion. Myth was downgraded to fantasy. Dreams became meaningless noise, and symbols, those ancient languages of the unconscious, were drowned in a flood of rationality, logic, and productivity. Carl Jung saw this long before the internet, before algorithmic attention loops, before dopamine-driven social validation. He noticed something fundamental. When modern people lose touch with myth, they don't become rational. They become lost. Jung proposed a revolutionary framework for the human psyche, not as a mechanical brain, but as a vast, symbolic ecosystem. According to him, the psyche is composed of layers, like sediment built over time, housing everything from our personal memories to the primordial images of our ancestors. At the surface is the persona, the mask we wear in public, the curated identity we present to the world. It's how we survive in social systems, but it's not who we truly are. Beneath that lies the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, repress, or hide. Our rage, our envy, our shame, not evil, but dangerous when unacknowledged. The shadow grows stronger the more we ignore it, until it finds other ways to surface, through projection, addiction, even violence. Then there is the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine energies within all of us, regardless of gender. These forces guide creativity, empathy, courage, reason, and transformation. But when distorted or ignored, they contribute to imbalance, confusion, and dysfunction in our relationships and self-perception. And at the deepest layer lies the self, not the ego, but the unifying principle of the psyche. The self is what Jung called the totality of who we are, conscious and unconscious, light and dark, masculine and feminine, chaos and order. The self is the compass pointing us toward integration, healing, and wholeness. But Jung warned, if we don't actively engage with these layers, they will act on us without our awareness. We think we are making choices, but often we are simply being played by parts of ourselves we don't even know exist. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you truly listened to your inner world? In today's world, the answer is often never. Modern life, designed for efficiency and external success, has no space for inner dialogue. We scroll instead of reflect. We consume instead of create. We self-medicate instead of introspect. And yet we wonder why we feel so disconnected. Why the aura feels so heavy. Because here's the truth Jung tried to teach. When you silence the symbolic, the psyche doesn't disappear. It decays. And the decay doesn't look like a loud breakdown. It looks like burnout, like apathy, like chronic discontent. It looks like millions of people feeling exhausted but unable to rest. It looks like a world losing its ability to dream, to feel, to believe in anything beyond what can be monetized or optimized. Even our suffering has become hollow, reduced to diagnoses, hashtags, and productivity hacks. We've traded archetypes for algorithms, stories for statistics, the sacred for the profitable. But this forgetting comes with a cost. A soul without language begins to scream, and the screaming is the heaviness. It's not just personal trauma. It's cultural amnesia, generational disconnection from the symbols that once anchored our ancestors. We've inherited myths we never learned, traumas we never healed, and archetypes we never met. And now they are surfacing, not in sacred rituals, but in anxiety, depression, existential dread, and identity confusion. Carl Jung believed that healing doesn't come from escaping the unconscious, but from confronting it, learning its language, reconnecting with the forgotten symbols of meaning. This doesn't mean rejecting science or progress. It means reintegrating the human soul into the equation of life. We are not machines. We are mythological beings, made of symbols, stories, and shadows. And when we forget the language of the soul, we lose the ability to understand ourselves. We become strangers inside our own minds, prisoners in curated identities, tourists in the territory of our own emotions. So, if the weight in your aura feels like it's growing, if the fog behind your eyes seems to linger, maybe it's not a sign of weakness. Maybe it's the soul knocking on the walls of your consciousness, demanding to be remembered. Maybe the heaviness is not a malfunction, but a message. And the question is, are you willing to listen? The world feels louder, sharper, angrier. Every headline screams. Every post divides. Every disagreement escalates. It's not just news anymore. It's war, not with bombs or borders, but with words, ideologies, and identities. You felt it. The tension, the sense that everyone's walking on eggshells, that you can't say the wrong thing, can't ask the wrong question, can't think outside the pre-approved narrative without being labeled, attacked, canceled. Something invisible is eating away at public discourse, and it feels like no one is in control. But what if this isn't just about politics? What if what we're witnessing is something deeper, something Carl Jung saw coming nearly a century ago? The return of the shadow. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, is not some external force. It's the hidden side of ourselves, the parts we've disowned, repressed, or buried because we were taught they were bad. Our rage, our shame, our fears, our secret cravings, the emotions we pretend not to feel, the traits we project onto others. Jung believed that when we ignore the shadow, it doesn't disappear. It grows. And it doesn't stay locked inside. It begins to leak out. It colors how we see the world. It attaches itself to enemies. It hunts for targets. And it demands blood. In ancient societies, the shadow was managed through rituals, myths, and sacred drama. There were spaces to confront it, name it, integrate it. Today we have no such rituals. We have Twitter. And so, the unintegrated shadow doesn't just live in individuals anymore. It spreads like wildfire through the collective. It builds echo chambers. It fuels outrage algorithms. It transforms ordinary disagreements into existential battles. The shadow hijacks identity. It makes people see monsters in those who simply think differently. Suddenly, every political opponent is a villain. Every mistake is unforgivable. Every nuance is flattened into black or white, good or evil. There is no middle ground in shadow territory. There is only projection. When you look out at the world today, at the culture wars, the tribalism, the hostility, it might look like a political crisis, but it's not. It's a psychological eruption. We have denied the darkness in ourselves for too long. We've wrapped it in productivity, in branding, in false virtue. We've curated our personalities to look flawless, and in doing so, we've buried the truth. Now, the truth is clawing its way to the surface, because the shadow doesn't go away. It waits, and when it's ignored for too long, it begins to act out on a global scale. This is why the world feels so intense. The psychic tension is everywhere, and no one feels safe. Not because danger is necessarily near, but because their unconscious is no longer under control. We project our shadow onto celebrities, politicians, co-workers, strangers online. We say they are the problem. They are dangerous. They are evil. But Jung warned, the moment you divide the world into pure heroes and villains, you are no longer seeing reality. You are living in myth, one created by your own disowned psyche. This is why ideological puritanism grows, why censorship thrives, why cancel culture feels like digital exorcism. It's not about truth, it's about shadow management. We are unconsciously trying to cleanse ourselves by burning others. The irony, the more we deny the shadow in ourselves, the more it shows up outside, in politics, in culture, in social media feeds. The collective unconscious has become saturated with unresolved archetypes, and now everyone is playing a role in a play they don't remember auditioning for. This is a spiritual crisis masquerading as a social one, a metaphysical confusion disguised as a moral revolution. And the cost is real, because the longer we avoid our personal responsibility, the heavier the psychic load becomes. The less we introspect, the more we lash out. The less we integrate, the more we scapegoat. We become less human, more reactive, less self-aware, more ideological. Jung's message was radical. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But today, that message is heresy, because we have built a world where blame is profitable, where outrage is monetized, where division is addictive. The rise of the shadow explains the intensity, the helplessness, the constant sense of dread in the collective. People are not just angry, they are lost, unconsciously projecting their inner chaos onto a world that has no symbolic tools to contain it. And yet, this moment, terrifying as it seems, is also a doorway. Because the shadow, when confronted honestly, is not just darkness, it is energy. It is transformation. It is potential. The shadow holds the parts of you that are raw, wild, and real. It holds your strength, your buried gifts, your capacity for truth. Integration is not about becoming good. It's about becoming whole. So, the next time you feel the intensity rising, the next time the news provokes you, or the comment section enrages you, or the world feels like it's coming undone, ask yourself, what part of me am I refusing to see? Because until we learn to face the shadow, we will continue to live in its chaos, and the world will keep feeling heavier, louder, darker, not because it's broken, but because we are being called to wake up. The shadow isn't the enemy. Denial is, and healing begins the moment we dare to look within. We once believed that technology would free us, that the internet would democratize knowledge, connect souls, and expand human consciousness. But what if we got it backwards? What if the internet didn't liberate our minds, but instead colonized them? In Jung's vision of the psyche, there exists a space deeper than the personal mind, a vast psychic reservoir shared by all humanity. He called it the collective unconscious. It's where archetypes live, the universal symbols, instincts, and myths that shape how we experience the world. In ancient times, this collective space was nourished through ritual, storytelling, and religion. Today, it's being hijacked by code, by algorithms, by feeds that do not care about truth, wisdom, or integration, only engagement. Social media is not neutral. It does not reflect who we are. It reflects the parts of us that react. And what reacts fastest? Fear, envy, outrage, the very contents of the shadow. When you open your phone, you're not scrolling through content. You are descending into a digital unconscious, a place where symbols are compressed into memes, where emotions are hijacked by headlines, and where your deepest instincts are fed back to you, distorted and amplified. Jung warned that the unconscious mind projects what it cannot face inwardly. In the past, this projection happened privately. Now, it happens instantly, globally, publicly. One tweet, one image, one viral video, and a symbol of shame or anger ripples across millions of minds. The algorithm is not evil, it's amoral. It's a mirror, but not a wise one. It is the mirror of Narcissus, showing you a reflection that traps you, not frees you. It loops your desires, your fears, your insecurities, your tribal identifications over and over again until the line between you and feed disappears. What happens when a billion people scroll simultaneously? What happens when every shadow is externalized? When every archetype is reduced to a hashtag? When every moment becomes performance? You get the birth of a new kind of collective unconscious, but this one is not rooted in ancient myth or sacred ritual. It's shaped by metrics, by data, by the psychological machinery of infinite monetized attention. Meme culture, for instance, isn't just entertainment, it's myth in miniature. In a few pixels, a meme can evoke persecution, rebellion, transcendence, or doom. It compresses archetypes: the fool, the hero, the enemy, the victim, the savior. But without depth, these symbols become hollow. Their power remains, but their wisdom is lost. The meme becomes a modern ritual, but one that leads nowhere. No integration, no transformation, only repetition. This is why doom scrolling feels spiritual and sickening at the same time. It's not just boredom, it's unconscious, archetypal fixation. You scroll through symbols of collapse, betrayal, apocalypse, not because you enjoy them, but because some ancient part of you is looking for meaning and not finding it. Cancel culture, too, has archetypal roots. The mob demands purification, a scapegoat, a sacrifice, but unlike in traditional myth, this sacrifice is not followed by healing. There is no reconciliation, just more division, more projection, more shadow. Every viral trend is a symbolic eruption, a wave in the digital unconscious, a cry for order in a sea of noise. But because these archetypes are untethered from any grounding mythology, they become dangerous. They control without consciousness. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But what happens when our technology becomes the unconscious? When your feed knows your fears better than you do? When your digital identity is shaped more by reaction than reflection? We've become addicted to echoes, surrounded by people who think like us, vote like us, speak like us, not by accident, by algorithmic design. These echo chambers are not just social, they are psychic. They prevent individuation, the very process Jung saw as the path to inner wholeness. Instead of confronting ourselves, we perform, we post, we posture, we react. The shadow thrives in performance because performance is a mask, and a world of masks cannot face itself. This is why everything online feels so emotionally charged, so morally inflated. The collective unconscious has gone digital, and it's running on instinct, not introspection. But here's the tragic irony. We think we are more connected than ever, but in truth, we've never been more psychically fragmented. The more we scroll, the more we forget. Forget how to be silent, how to be whole, how to feel something without posting it, how to suffer without broadcasting, how to exist without being seen. Jung believed that symbols, real symbols, emerged from deep psychic work, from dreams, from suffering, from facing the unconscious and integrating it. But what happens when those symbols are manufactured by market forces? We end up trapped in what philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls the hell of the same, an endless loop of content that mirrors our own limitations, a world where nothing new truly emerges, only repetition, addiction, exhaustion. The digital unconscious is not evil, but it is unexamined, and that makes it dangerous, because the real war is not between left and right, not between generations, not even between ideologies. The real war is between consciousness and the machine, between self-awareness and reflex, between the ancient soul and the new god of the algorithm. And the longer we outsource our attention, our emotions, our myths, the heavier our aura becomes, because deep down, we know something is watching us, not with eyes, but with data, not with judgment, but with calculation. And it's reflecting back a version of us we haven't yet dared to truly understand, but we must, because the digital mirror does not sleep, and every scroll is a vote for who we become next. There's a silent crisis unfolding, not of money, not of war, but of meaning. It doesn't scream like headlines do. It doesn't trend. It festers, quietly, in the moments between scrolling, in the stillness of late nights, in the blank stare before a screen. It's a void that most can't name, but everyone feels. Carl Jung warned us, when a society loses its myth, it loses its soul. For thousands of years, myths served as the architecture of the human psyche. They weren't just stories. They were maps of meaning. They told us who we were, where we came from, why we suffer, and how to make sense of it all. But in the modern world, myth has been replaced by mechanism, magic replaced by logic, spirit replaced by productivity. Everything must be explained, optimized, monetized, or discarded. And yet, the human soul has not evolved away from needing myth. It has only become more desperate for it. In a mythless society, we do not stop believing. We just start believing in anything. Politics becomes religion. Fandoms become tribes. Celebrities become gods. Conspiracies become creation myths. None of this is inherently wrong. What's dangerous is how unconscious it all is, how desperate we are to find symbols in the rubble, how quickly we cling to anything that promises identity, purpose, and narrative coherence. Jung called this the spiritual hunger of the modern age, a neurosis born not from trauma, but from the absence of transcendence. This is why so many are drawn to extremes, extreme ideologies, extreme identities, extreme content. The psyche is starving, and extremity feels like meaning, but it's not real meaning. It's counterfeit, a substitution. Enter Baudrillard's idea of hyper-reality, a world where simulations replace reality, where the map becomes more real than the territory, where we no longer engage with truth, but with copies of symbols, drifting further from anything authentic. We live in a hyper-real age, a world of curated selves, algorithmic truths, and aestheticized outrage. The rituals of old are gone. In their place, we have rituals of consumption, of performance, of spectacle. We wear brands like talismans. We quote influencers like prophets. We believe we are free, but everything we believe has been shaped by invisible forces, and still, something inside us mourns, something ancient, something sacred, because we remember, if only in dreams, what it meant to be grounded in story, in something older than us, larger than us. Without myth, the psyche fragments. The shadow goes unintegrated. The self becomes hollow. Anxiety isn't just a chemical imbalance. It's the soul screaming for orientation in a world that's erased all maps. Look at the rise of nostalgia culture, the constant recycling of the past, the obsession with childhood shows, vintage aesthetics, retro tech. This isn't just sentimentality, it's a hunger for archetype, a longing for myth, for meaning that feels timeless in a world of endless novelty. And so, the heaviness we feel isn't just burnout. It's not just overwork or bad news or economic pressure. It's mythic disorientation, a deep psychic vertigo. We've been cut off from the symbolic nourishment our ancestors depended on. The temples have been replaced by shopping malls, the fireside tales by TikToks, the wise elders by trending voices. But a soul cannot live on dopamine alone. To lose myth is to lose the context for suffering, to not know what it means, or where it's leading, or who you are while enduring it. In myth, suffering was a portal, a test, a rite of passage. In modern life, it's an error, a flaw in the system, a personal failure. And so we numb, we scroll, we consume, we perform, hoping to distract the soul from the fact that it no longer knows where it is. Jung saw this coming. He warned that modern man is in danger of becoming a mass man, unmoored from inner guidance, tossed by collective trends, alienated from his own soul. And yet, within every human still lies the capacity to reconnect, to remember. We cannot manufacture myths, but we can rediscover them in silence, in introspection, in dreams, in art, in choosing depth over speed, presence over performance. Myths are not gone, they are sleeping, and the aura that feels heavy, it may be the weight of the soul trying to awaken, trying to remember something sacred, something lost. Because without myth, life becomes noise, but with it, even pain becomes poetry, even darkness, initiation, even chaos, a path There is a reason your dreams feel stranger lately, a reason your boredom feels deeper, a reason your sadness doesn't just feel like sadness, but like an existential weight pressing against the very edges of who you are. It is not the world alone. It is the self, calling. Carl Jung believed that beneath the surface of your conscious identity lies a vast inner terrain, not random, not chaotic, but deeply structured, ancient, archetypal. This terrain is what Jung called the psyche, and at its center lies a journey, a path not to perfection, but to wholeness. He called it individuation. Individuation is not self-improvement. It's not a morning routine, a 5-step plan, or a new mindset. It is a confrontation with everything you have denied about yourself, everything you've repressed, ignored, or buried to fit in, to be liked, to feel safe. It's the painful realization that your normal has been carefully curated to avoid the parts of you that threaten your identity. But those parts don't die. They wait, in dreams, in addictions, in triggers, in projections. They appear as the shadow, the version of you that holds your anger, your insecurity, your jealousy, your power. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The heaviness you feel may not be a flaw. It may be the beginning of that confrontation. Anxiety is not always an illness. It can be a wake-up call. Depression, boredom, disillusionment. These are not just malfunctions of a broken brain. They are messages from the unconscious, pulling you inward, demanding attention, refusing to let you remain in autopilot, because life, real life, does not happen on the surface. It happens in the depths. To individuate is to descend into those depths and reclaim what you've lost, your instincts, your imagination, your inner voice, your sacred rage, your forgotten dreams. It is not easy. In fact, it is terrifying, because the moment you begin this journey, you realize you must let go of who you thought you were. You must risk alienation, discomfort, solitude, but in doing so, you reclaim authorship. You begin to write your story from within, rather than be written by forces outside you. The world will not make this easy. Society thrives on the unindividuated. It prefers the predictable, the docile, the externally guided. It rewards conformity, not inner exploration. It sells distractions, not directions. But Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. How many of us are being quietly ruled by wounds we've never faced? How many cycles do we repeat, convinced it's just who we are? The truth is, individuation is not just a psychological luxury. It is a spiritual necessity. The chaos in the world, the projections, the divisions, these are signs of a collective that has refused to do its inner work. We fight demons outside because we're too afraid to face the ones within. But what if your suffering is not a dead end, but a threshold? What if the weight you feel is not a curse, but a call to return to yourself? Jung believed that within each of us lives a self, a deeper intelligence, wiser than the ego, older than the personality. This self is not invented, it is uncovered. It is what's left when the masks fall. Individuation is the process of uniting with that self, integrating the shadow, honoring the archetypes, listening to your dreams, and stepping into the mythic story of your life. It's the realization that your journey matters, not because it's flashy or visible, but because it is true. The aura feels heavy because your soul is waking up, and that awakening is not clean. It is messy. It breaks things. It rewrites narratives. It reorients priorities. But on the other side of that chaos is clarity. You are not broken. You are breaking open. And the path forward is not out there. It's inward, through the shadow, through the symbols, through the silence. Individuation is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. That is the liberation Jung spoke of. Not freedom from suffering, but meaning through it. Not control over life, but alignment with it. So when the world feels heavy, stop, listen, look inward. The psyche is speaking, and if you dare to follow it, you may find that the very weight threatening to crush you was actually trying to guide you home. The heaviness returns, but it's no longer just a weight pressing down. It's a pulse, steady, ancient, and alive. At first, you thought it was a sign of weakness, a malfunction, something to numb, escape, fix. But what if it's none of those things? What if the heaviness is not asking for sedation, but attention? We live in a time of constant motion, constant noise. The more chaotic the outer world becomes, the more intolerable stillness feels. Yet it is in that stillness, beneath the anxiety, beneath the boredom, beneath the discontent, that something deeper stirs. The soul does not speak in words. It speaks in symptoms. It whispers through sleepless nights, through unexplained sadness, through the hollow ache, after another scroll session, another dopamine hit, another day lived in someone else's script. And maybe that whisper is growing louder, because maybe it's time. Carl Jung believed that transformation begins with disruption. The psyche doesn't evolve through comfort. It evolves through crisis. Collapse is not the end. It's the alchemy of becoming. What if the world's chaos isn't a malfunction, but a symbolic death? A death of the ego that no longer fits the immensity of what we're becoming? Old systems, old masks, old myths, they are breaking down, not because we're doomed, but because something new is struggling to be born. And birth is never quiet. The heaviness you feel is not here to destroy you. It's a threshold. The pain is not punishment. It's the pressure of potential, pressing against the walls of a too small life. In a culture of synthetic identities and curated personas, the unease you feel might be your most honest part. The last ember of the real, still glowing beneath layers of performance, because the soul doesn't want you to escape. It wants you to transform. And transformation isn't about fixing your life. It's about reorienting it toward what's timeless, what's mythic, what's real. This isn't about going back to ancient stories. It's about remembering that you are one, that your life is not just a timeline of events, but a sacred unfolding, that your suffering isn't meaningless, but meaningful, if you dare to listen. What if your depression is the death of an outdated self? What if your anxiety is your psyche resisting a false path? What if your emptiness is the space required to receive something new? The heaviness is not the enemy. The enemy is forgetting what it means. You weren't meant to live a flat life. You were meant to live mythically, to face dragons, to walk through inner forests, to descend, to rise, to integrate, to carry the weight, not as a burden, but as proof that you are alive in a time that desperately needs awake souls. So when you feel it again, that weight in your chest, that ache in your gut, don't reach for escape. Reach inward. The heaviness you feel, maybe your soul reminding you that you're not living mythically enough. It is not asking for escape, but transformation.